You all, we got to pray for Sister Sherri. Sherri, she's going through a lot. You guys know that her mom had a lot of complications when she was in her early 40s for diabetes. You guys know her show just got canceled, and she said she didn't even know her show was going to get canceled. And you know, all that stress, it messes with your health. And you know, Sherri, she puts on like a nice, sweet face that she's tough, but you don't know what goes on behind closed doors and what she's really dealing with emotional. You know, and a lot of women, they hide their real emotions and they got to pull up a front to make it seem like they okay. But honey, she's going through it. I came across this video and the stuff that they're saying about her health and what's going on. And it got me to thinking, are they going to do her just like they did Wendy Williams? Because you guys remember how Wendy Williams, her health was failing her too. And then next thing you know, she was gone. So I want to know your thoughts about this video. I know you guys love when we react to these videos. So make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe so I can push more videos like this, okay?
I just came back from the doctor's office to get my A1C because I'm a type 2 diabetic. In 2016, 17, and 18, my numbers were 6.6. I lost my mom in her early 40s to diabetic complications. I just lost my aunt. She had diabetes and she got her leg cut off and she died. Both my sisters are on insulin right now. And it's because Jeffrey said to me, Mommy, if you die, who's going to be my bodyguard?
Sherri Shepherd made a confession that instantly caught people's attention. She revealed that there was a time when type 2 diabetes seemed like the biggest threat to her life. But what shocked many fans was what she said next. According to Sherri, if diabetes had never entered her life, she might not be alive and healthy today.
But the doctor said, they said, Sherri, if your appendix burst, they said that you could die. That's what they told me. Excruciating pain in my abdomen. Literally, they put me on an IV. Literally, and I started crying. I started crying.
Yep, you heard that right. The very condition that once terrified her eventually became the wake-up call that changed everything. At first, that statement sounded hard to believe. Diabetes is usually linked to health complications, fear, and heartbreaking outcomes. So how could someone say that it actually saved their life? That was the question many people started asking. But once Sherri began opening up about what had really been happening behind the scenes, the picture became much clearer. And the deeper people looked into her struggle, the more shocking the reality became. The truth was that diabetes was not just another health problem in her family. It had already left a painful trail behind. Sherri had watched loved ones suffer because of the disease. Her mother had passed away at a young age due to diabetes-related complications.
For me, about losing weight, it was about having a healthy lifestyle. I got a 4-year-old that I had at a late age. My mom passed away at 42 from diabetic complications. I want to be here for my son.
Years later, other family members faced their own battles with the same condition. Some dealt with severe health problems, while others continued fighting to keep their blood sugar under control. For Sherri, this was not something she heard about in medical reports. She had seen the consequences with her own eyes. That was what made the situation even more surprising. Despite knowing how dangerous diabetes could be, she did not immediately panic when warning signs started appearing in her own life. In fact, she initially pushed those concerns to the side. Like many people, she convinced herself that things were not as serious as they seemed. She kept moving forward, hoping the problems would somehow work themselves out, but her body kept sending signals that something was wrong. She often felt exhausted. Some days her energy seemed to disappear for no clear reason. Her vision occasionally became blurry. She felt thirsty more often than usual and found herself making frequent trips to the bathroom. At times, she even experienced numbness in her feet. These were not random symptoms. They were warning signs that her health was heading in a dangerous direction. As the symptoms became harder to ignore, doctors grew increasingly concerned. Medical tests started revealing numbers that were moving in the wrong direction.
I think if you're not diabetic, you know somebody who has diabetes, or you've been to the doctor and you've heard the phrase borderline diabetic or pre-diabetic. I just don't want people to be scared. I don't want people to be scared.
The warnings became more serious, and healthcare professionals wanted her to understand exactly what was at stake. But here is the shocking part. Even after receiving those warnings, Sherri still struggled to fully accept what was happening. Deep down, she knew the disease was dangerous. She had seen the damage it had caused in her own family. Yet accepting that the same thing could happen to her was a completely different challenge. What nobody knew was that this period became one of the most critical moments of her life. The decisions she made during this time would determine where her future was heading. And while doctors continued raising concerns, Sherri was about to face a reality check that would be impossible to ignore. The next warning she received was so direct, so personal, and so frightening that it forced her to look at her future in a way she never had before. And that was when everything started to change. The more doctors looked at Sherri's condition, the more concerned they became. Her symptoms were no longer small warning signs that could be brushed aside. The medical reports continued showing that her blood sugar levels were staying higher than they should have been. Every appointment seemed to bring another conversation about the risks she was facing. But even with all those warnings, accepting the reality of the situation was not easy. One of the biggest problems was that Sherri still believed she had more time. She knew diabetes was serious, but she convinced herself that the worst case scenarios were things that happened to other people. It is a reaction many people have when they receive bad health news. They hear the diagnosis, but emotionally, they are not ready to face it. That was exactly where Sherri found herself. The disease was real, the risks were real, but part of her still hoped she could continue living the same way she always had. As a result, the changes that doctors wanted to see did not happen right away. She continued enjoying many of the foods she loved most. Comfort foods remained a major part of her daily life. Rich meals, sugary treats, and foods that made controlling blood sugar even harder were still finding their way onto her plate. Looking back, she later admitted that she was living in complete denial during that period. She did not want to talk about the disease, and she certainly did not want it controlling her life. But while Sherri tried to ignore the problem, her doctors were becoming more direct. They understood that diabetes was not something that simply stayed the same. Left unchecked, it could continue causing damage throughout the body. The conversations became less about possibilities and more about consequences. Every visit seemed to carry a stronger sense of urgency than the one before it. Then came a moment that Sherri never forgot. During one appointment, a doctor decided to stop being gentle. Instead of using medical terms and complicated explanations, the doctor spoke in a way that hit much closer to home. The doctor reminded Sherri about something she loved and enjoyed every day. Then, she gave her a warning that was impossible to ignore. The message was simple. If she continued on the same path, the consequences could be life-changing. Let me tell you, this was not the kind of conversation most people expect during a routine medical visit. Suddenly, the future no longer felt distant. It no longer felt like something that might happen years later. For the first time, the risks felt real, personal, and frighteningly close. The warning stayed in her mind long after the appointment ended. Yet what made the situation even more surprising was that the conversation did not immediately transform her overnight. You would think a frightening warning from a doctor would instantly change everything. But human nature is rarely that simple. Fear alone does not always create action. Sometimes people hear exactly what they need to hear and still struggle to change. That was what made this period so dangerous. On the outside, everything appeared normal. Sherri continued working, appearing on television, and making audiences laugh. Most fans had no idea that she was dealing with such a serious internal battle. Behind the smiles and public appearances, there was a growing conflict between what she knew she needed to do and what she was actually doing. What makes this story different? It was not just about food, weight, or medical numbers. It was about someone trying to escape a future that had already hurt so many people in her family. Every warning reminded her of painful memories she wished she could forget. Every doctor visit forced her to think about outcomes she desperately hoped would never happen to her. At that point, Sherri was still carrying the weight of everything she had been told. She knew the risks, she knew her family history, she knew her health was heading in the wrong direction. But knowing something and truly feeling it are often two different things. For a long time, the danger felt like a medical issue. It felt like numbers on a report. It felt like something doctors talked about during appointments. Then, one simple question changed everything. Jeffrey looked at his mother and asked what would happen if she died. The words were simple, but their impact was enormous. Suddenly, this was no longer about blood sugar levels or medical charts. It was no longer about doctors predicting future complications. It became something much more personal. In that moment, Sherri was forced to think about the people who depended on her. She had spent years hearing health advice, but hearing concern from her own child created a completely different emotional reaction. This is where it gets interesting. The question did not just make her emotional, it forced her to look at her future from a perspective she had been avoiding. For years, she had watched diabetes affect members of her family. She had seen loved ones suffer. She had experienced painful losses that stayed with her long after they were gone. But now, she found herself asking a difficult question. Was she heading toward the same future? For the first time, the answer scared her. That moment stayed with her long after the conversation ended. She kept thinking about it. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that continuing down the same path was no longer an option. She could not keep pretending that the problem would disappear on its own. She could not keep waiting for the perfect moment to make changes. So, she made a decision. Instead of focusing on quick fixes, she started focusing on daily habits. One step at a time, she began changing the way she lived. Some of those changes were not easy. In fact, many of them challenged routines she had followed for years. Foods she once enjoyed regularly suddenly became things she had to avoid. Temptations that seemed harmless before now carried a completely different meaning. One of the biggest changes involved sugar. Sherri eventually decided to remove sugar from her lifestyle in a serious way. What sounded simple on paper became much harder in real life. Many people can relate to that struggle. Changing eating habits is difficult, especially when those habits have been part of your daily routine for years. There were moments when discipline was tested. There were moments when old cravings tried to pull her back. But this is how things slowly started moving in a different direction. Instead of giving up after a few days or weeks, she stayed committed. Instead of looking for instant results, she focused on consistency. She paid closer attention to what she ate. She became more active. Exercise started becoming a regular part of her life. Little by little, the choices she made each day began adding up. The changes were not dramatic overnight. There was no magical moment where everything suddenly became easy. The progress came gradually. But what nobody realized at the time was that those small decisions were quietly creating a massive transformation behind the scenes. As weeks turned into months and months turned into years, something remarkable started happening. Her body began responding. The symptoms that once worried doctors started improving. Her energy levels began changing. Her overall health started moving in a positive direction. And while Sherri could feel the difference herself, the biggest surprise was still waiting ahead. The biggest surprise was still ahead. When Sherri Shepherd went in for another medical checkup, she expected a normal visit like many others before it. There was no reason to believe that anything unusual was about to happen. Doctors reviewed her latest results, looked at the numbers, and almost immediately noticed something different. The reports were telling a very different picture from the one they had been seeing before. But here's the shocking part. The numbers that had once caused so much concern were no longer heading in the wrong direction. Her latest A1C results showed a major improvement. The doctor was reportedly surprised and wanted to know exactly what she had been doing. After everything Sherri had struggled with, this was a moment that caught even her off guard. Yep, you heard that right. The same woman who once admitted she was living in denial was now sitting in a doctor's office hearing news she never expected to hear. The changes she had made behind the scenes were finally showing up in her medical reports. And for someone whose family had been deeply affected by diabetes, that news carried even more meaning. Fans quickly began talking about the update. Many people were impressed by the progress she had made. Others were inspired by the fact that she openly shared both her mistakes and her victories. Unlike many celebrities who only talk about success, Sherri spoke honestly about the fear, the denial, and the difficult moments that came before things started improving. But that wasn't the end of it. Another detail soon grabbed attention. Doctors no longer felt she needed the same diabetes medications she had depended on before. Her healthier eating habits, regular exercise, and better blood sugar control had changed the conversation completely. For many fans, this became one of the most surprising parts of the entire situation. What makes this story different? It was never just about losing weight or improving test results. The real emotional side of this news was the family history hanging over everything. Sherri had already watched diabetes affect people she loved. She had seen painful complications destroy lives. She had experienced losses that stayed with her for years. That fear never completely disappeared. In fact, during her emotional message, Sherri reminded everyone exactly why this issue remained so personal. She spoke about losing her mother because of diabetes complications. She spoke about family members who had faced severe health problems connected to the disease. Those memories continued following her even while she celebrated positive progress. This is where things became emotional for many viewers. Instead of simply celebrating herself, Sherri chose to encourage other people facing similar struggles. She wanted people to understand that ignoring warning signs could be dangerous. She wanted people to take their health seriously before it was too late. And most importantly, she wanted people to realize that diabetes was not something to play around with. The craziest part is that despite all the improvements, Sherri never claimed the battle was completely over. Health challenges like these require constant attention, discipline, and monitoring. One good report does not mean someone can stop caring about their health. It simply means they have taken an important step in the right direction. And that is exactly why this news touched so many people. What started as a frightening diagnosis turned into a powerful reminder about family, responsibility, and second chances. But fans also understood that Sherri's health would continue to need attention moving forward. The concerns that once surrounded her did not disappear overnight, and many people were simply grateful to see her speaking openly about such a serious issue. As this news spread, countless fans flooded social media with supportive messages. Many praised her honesty, many thanked her for sharing her experience, and many simply wished her strength and good health for the future. Before we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. Sherri Shepherd has been through some very difficult health challenges, and while her recent update brought hope to many fans, her health remains something that deserves care and attention. Please keep Sherri in your prayers and send your best wishes for her continued health and happiness. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and leave a prayer message for her if you'd like. And if you enjoyed this update, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest celebrity news and updates. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.